Have you ever felt fear and curiosity battling in your chest? That feeling that you should run, but something pulls you in the opposite direction? That's what I felt that December afternoon, on the shoulder of a highway in rural Missouri. I was 23 coming back from college, and I'd just missed the last bus. I was alone when I heard the rumble of a diesel engine. A truck slowed down. My heart raced, not with relief. I pretended for years that it was just a coincidence. But the second that truck stopped, I knew nothing would be the same again. Today you'll understand why a single look can change everything. My name is Lucas. I grew up in a small Midwestern town where being different is an invitation to be judged. I was good at hiding, at seeming like what they expected of me. But that day, on that empty road, I was far from any familiar eyes. My friend Pedro had warned me weeks earlier. Watch out for truck drivers, Lucas. They know how to read people. They know when you're running away. I laughed at the time, but with that driver watching me through the rearview mirror, his words came back heavy. The door creaked open. A deep voice asked, "Where to?" "Springfield," I answered. "I'm passing through there. Hop in." I should have made up an excuse, but I stood still. He didn't insist, just waited. That disarmed me. I looked at the empty road and the encroaching darkness. A part of me wanted to get in, wanted to know what was on the other side. "Thanks," I said, and climbed up. The door shut like a lock, a point of no return. The cab smelled of diesel and coffee. I sat down, adjusting my backpack. When he turned his face, my stomach tied in a knot. 40-something weathered skin, calloused hands. His gaze wasn't predatory, it was careful. "Put your seatbelt on," he said. "Road's got potholes." I obeyed. The engine roared, and we were back on the road. A heavy silence settled in. I watched his every move out of the corner of my eye. "Been waiting long?" he asked suddenly. "About 2 hours. Missed the bus." He nodded and kept driving. "I never pick up hitchhikers," he said, more to himself. "It's not safe." I froze. "But you stopped." He turned his face slightly. There was recognition in his eyes. "I did." "Why?" He shrugged. "I don't know. You looked like you needed it." And he was right. But I never imagined that simple ride would be the turning point of my existence. "Do you live in Springfield?" he asked, breaking the silence again. "I do. I used to. I study away now. I only come back for the holidays." "College?" "Yeah, literature." He made a low noise as if he found that interesting. "Literature. Must be nice to read a lot. I never had the patience for it." I smiled without meaning to. It's not for everyone, really. Another silence. But this time, a little lighter. A little less charged. Or maybe it was just my imagination. "My name is Diego. I've been driving this route for 15 years. Lucas. Nice to meet you, Lucas." The way he said my name sounded intimate. I looked away, heart racing. Diego smiled slightly. "It's going to be a long trip, if you want to sleep." "I'm not going to sleep," I answered too quickly. His smile widened. "All right. I'm happy for the company." In that moment, I realized I hadn't gotten into the truck out of desperation. I wanted to stop running. The silence was heavy. I tried not to look at him, but my eyes kept sliding to his profile. He noticed. "You okay there?" he asked. "I am," I lied. My heart was pounding, and I didn't know what to do with my hands. "Where are you from?" he asked after a while. "Springfield," I said. "Small town in the heartland. I'm heading home." He made a sound of recognition. "I know it. Beautiful town. Real American heartland." "Yeah," I said. "Small too." Too small, I wanted to say. Small enough for everyone to know everyone else's business. So there's no space to be who you really are without becoming the topic at the diner, church, or Main Street. But I didn't say that. Not yet. "Do you study?" he asked. "Literature," I replied. "At the State University upstate." He smiled slightly. Not a full smile, just a quirk at the corner of his mouth. "Makes sense," he said. "What do you mean?" "You look like someone who reads a lot, someone who thinks too much." I didn't know if that was a compliment or a criticism, but something in the way he said it made me feel seen, recognized, and that was both comforting and terrifying. "What about you?" I asked, wanting to shift the focus off me. "How long have you been a truck driver?" 15 years, he said, since I was 27. Before that, I worked in a factory, assembling parts, same place every day, same walls, same smell of oil and metal. After a while, I couldn't take it anymore. Felt like I was suffocating. I knew exactly what he meant. That feeling of tightness, of walls closing in, of no longer fitting in the space they told you was your place. "And is the road better?" I asked. He took a moment to answer. His eyes went distant for a second, as if he was seeing something beyond the asphalt ahead. "Different," he finally said. "On the road, you don't have to pretend to be anyone. No neighbors, no relatives asking when you're going to get married, when you're going to settle down. No people expecting you to be something you'll never be." His voice had a hardness that wasn't there before. A contained bitterness, swallowed down. And I recognized that too, because I knew exactly what it was like living trying to fit into a mold that wasn't yours. "But it's lonely, isn't it?" I said softly. He looked at me then. For the first time since we started talking, he took his eyes off the road and really looked at me. And in that look, there was something that went right through me. A deep sadness, ancient, the kind of sadness that has already become part of who you are. "Yeah," he said, "it's very lonely." And in that moment I realized Diego wasn't just driving a truck. He was running away, just like me. Maybe not from the same thing, but from the same feeling, from that suffocation, from that pressure to be someone you're not. But what he asked me next caught me totally off guard. "Why were you alone on that road?" he asked. And this time the question had weight. It wasn't just small talk. It was genuine curiosity, maybe even concern. I hesitated. Part of me wanted to make up an excuse. Say I missed the bus because I was distracted. Bad luck. Anything light and harmless. But another part of me, a part I barely recognized, wanted to be honest, wanted to share the burden. "I broke up with someone," I said, "about 2 months ago, and I thought going home would make me feel better. That maybe there, with my family, things would become clearer. But the closer I get, the more I realize that's not true." Diego didn't say anything. He just waited, and that silence gave me the courage to continue. "My family doesn't know who I am. They think I'm the studious son who's going to marry a girl and have kids. I let them think that because it's easier." My voice came out more choked up than I expected. I blinked fast, trying to hold back anything that looked like weakness. But Diego didn't look away. He just nodded, slowly, like someone who understands, like someone who's lived it. "I know what it's like," he said, "spending your whole life pretending, hiding, always afraid someone will find out and everything will fall apart." "You too?" I asked, and my voice came out almost as a whisper. He ran his hand over the back of his neck again, sighed deeply, looked back at the road, and when he spoke, his voice was lower, more vulnerable. "Me too," he said. "Always." We stayed silent for a while, but now it was different. It wasn't that heavy silence from the beginning anymore. It was something shared, a mutual confession without words. I looked out the window. The trees were passing too fast to distinguish, just dark blurs against an even darker sky. Out there was nothing, no light, no houses, no landmarks. It was like we were suspended in time, isolated from the rest of the world. And in that isolation, there was a strange sense of freedom, that for a brief moment we didn't need to be anyone but ourselves. "Do you regret it?" I asked. "Choosing the road?" Diego stayed quiet for a long time, so long I thought he wouldn't answer. But then he spoke, and his voice was loaded with something I couldn't name. Maybe remorse, maybe acceptance. "I regret not having the courage sooner," he said, "having waited so long to at least try to be honest with myself. But the road? No. The road saved me, gave me space to breathe, to think, to not have to pretend all the time. I understood, perfectly, because that was exactly what I felt when I was far from home. Far from expectations, far from judgmental eyes. It was easier to breathe, easier to exist. "You look like someone I used to know," Diego said suddenly. His voice changed, became softer, almost nostalgic. "Who?" I asked. He hesitated, licked his lips, gripped the steering wheel tighter. "Me," he said finally. "When I was your age. That same look, scared, curious, wanting something but too afraid to go after it. I see you and I remember who I was before I learned to give up." His words hit me hard. Because that was it. That was exactly it. I was scared. But I was also tired of being scared. Tired of living half my life hiding. And maybe, just maybe, Diego understood that better than anyone else I'd ever met. "I don't want to give up," I said. My voice came out firm, decided, more than I expected. Diego looked at me again, and this time there was something different in his look. Something that seemed almost hope, or maybe admiration, or maybe just recognition. "Then don't give up," he said. "Because if you give up now, 20 years from now, you'll be driving this truck in my place, alone, running away, without ever having really lived." The truck slowed down and turned onto a small dirt road. Diego turned off the engine. The silence was absolute. "What are you doing?" He turned to me. There was fear in his eyes. "I need to ask you something. I promise I'll get you safely to San Juan, no matter the answer." My heart raced. I knew this question was going to change something. I could feel it. "Are you afraid of me?" he asked. I looked at him. Really looked. At his tired eyes. At his calloused hands still holding the steering wheel. At the tension in his shoulders. And I realized Diego wasn't the danger. He never was. The danger was in me. In what I felt, in what I wanted, and in the fear of admitting it. "No," I said. "I'm not afraid of you." He nodded slowly, but didn't look away. "Then of what?" he asked softly. And I stayed there, with his question hanging in the air between us, knowing that the next thing I said would change everything. That there was no turning back. That for the first time in my life, I was about to be completely honest about who I was. About what I wanted. But the words didn't come. They got stuck in my throat, because admitting it out loud was making it all real. And real was terrifying. Diego waited, patiently, as if he had all the time in the world. And I realized he already knew the answer. That maybe he always knew. From the moment he stopped the truck on that deserted road. From the very first glance. From the first shared silence. He just wanted to hear it from me. But I wasn't ready to say it yet. And I sat there, with his question hanging in the air. "Then of what? What are you afraid of, Lucas?" The words were stuck. I knew the answer. I'd known it all along, really. But admitting it out loud meant crossing a line I had never crossed before. It meant making it all real, and real was terrifying. Diego didn't push. He didn't fill the silence with platitudes or attempts to comfort me. He simply waited. His hands on the steering wheel, his gaze fixed on the road ahead, but I could feel his full attention on me. As if the entire world had shrunk down to that tiny space inside the cabin. Just the two of us and that unspoken truth pulsing between us. I swallowed hard. My fingers nervously toyed with the stitching of the worn leather seat. The smell of diesel and coffee had already become familiar. Comfortable, in a strange way, as if I had always belonged there. "I'm afraid of disappointing people," I finally whispered. My voice came out weaker than I intended. "My family. They have this whole expectation of who I should be, what I should want. And I stopped, because finishing that sentence would be admitting everything. Diego nodded slowly. His fingers drummed once against the wheel, a gesture I had already started to recognize as his way of processing something difficult. "I know that fear well," he said softly. Something in his voice made me look. Really look. And for the first time since I'd stepped into that truck, I saw beneath the surface. Beyond the tough trucker, the man of few words who kept his distance, I saw someone who carried the same weight I did, maybe even heavier, maybe for much longer. You too? I asked, knowing the answer but needing to hear it anyway. Diego let out a short, humorless laugh. I've spent my whole life disappointing people, Lucas. Or at least trying not to. Hiding who I really am. It amounts to the same thing in the end. He paused. The road stretched out empty before us, the truck's headlights cutting through the darkness. There were no other cars. No light but the moon and stars above. It was as if we were the only two people in the world. You know what the worst part is? He continued. It's not lying to your family. It's not pretending to be someone you're not when you go back home for Christmas. The worst part is looking in the mirror and no longer recognizing who's looking back at you. Because you spent so much time being what others expected that you forgot who you really were. My chest tightened, because he had just described exactly how I felt. That terror of waking up one day and realizing that the person I had become was just a performance. A lie told so well that even I didn't believe in the truth anymore. How old are you? I asked. 42. And did you always know about yourself? Diego was silent for a long moment. When he answered, his voice was lower, more vulnerable. Since I was 16, maybe. But knowing and accepting are two very different things. Knowing and acting are even more so. My heart was pounding, acting. And did you? I began, but my courage failed me. Act? He finished for me. He lifted a hand from the wheel and ran it through the graying hair at his temples. A few times, a long time ago, always hidden, always afraid, always hating myself afterward. The pain in his voice was palpable, and something inside me broke a little, because I could see his path becoming mine. 20 years of loneliness. 20 years of lies and secret encounters and shame. 20 years looking in the mirror and seeing a stranger. I don't want that, I said. The words came out before I could filter them. I don't want to spend my whole life hiding who I am. Diego glanced at me. His dark eyes shimmered in the dim light from the dashboard. Then don't hide. It sounded so simple when he said it like that, but we both knew it wasn't. The danger was there, pulsing between us. That's easy to say, I murmured. But when you go back home, when your mother asks if you found a girlfriend yet, when your uncles make jokes about you being too sensitive, when the whole town expects you to be a certain way. I know, Lucas. He interrupted gently. I know. I grew up in a town even smaller than yours, probably. A place where everyone knows everyone. Where being different is being wrong. Then how do you deal with it? I asked. My voice was thick with emotion now. All that loneliness, all that lying. Diego slowed the truck down. He didn't stop completely, but reduced speed until we were almost crawling along the deserted highway. He really looked at me now, turning his head, his eyes meeting mine in the dark. I don't deal with it, he said simply. That's why I drive. 15 years on the road, going from one place to another, never staying long enough anywhere for anyone to ask questions. I don't deal with it. I just exist, one day at a time. His brutal honesty left me speechless, because that was it, wasn't it? The life that awaited me if I continued on the path I was on. Not living, just existing, just surviving. It must be very lonely, I whispered. Diego nodded slowly. Yeah, but you get used to it, or at least you learn to live with it. I don't want to get used to loneliness, I said, more to myself than to him. Then don't. Those 3 words hung between us, loaded with meaning, with possibility, with danger. There's a 20-year difference between us, I said softly. My family would kill me. The whole town would. I know. His voice was calm, steady. I'm not telling you what to do, Lucas. I'm just saying that hiding who you are will kill you inside. Slowly, one piece at a time, until there's nothing left. He looked back at the road. He accelerated again, the engine roaring as we picked up speed. But something had changed. The air between us was thicker, more charged. You see me? I said suddenly. The The words came out in a whisper, but I knew he heard. When you look at me, you really see me. Not who I pretend to be. Not who my family wants me to be. The real me. Diego took a deep breath. His jaw clenched. I do, he admitted. I see because I recognize. Because I look at you and see who I was 20 years ago, before spending so much time lying that I forgot how to be honest. And what do you see? I asked, turning my body in the seat to face him. When you look at me, what do you see? He hesitated. For the first time, I saw Diego truly unsure. His hands gripped the steering wheel tighter. I see someone on a precipice, he said finally, deciding whether to jump or retreat to safety. I see fear. I see desire. I see courage fighting against years of conditioning. I see. He paused, swallowed hard. I see someone I wish I had been, before choosing fear. My heart was beating so hard I was sure he could hear it. Because this wasn't an abstract conversation about identity and acceptance anymore. It had become about us. About this tiny space we shared. About the way his gaze lingered on me. About the way my skin tingled whenever he got too close. I see you too, I said softly. Diego. He closed his eyes for a second. Just one. But it was enough for me to see the pain there. The desire. The internal war. You shouldn't, he murmured. But I do. Silence. Just the sound of the engine and the air conditioning and our shared breathing. What do you see when you look at me? He asked. His voice was hoarse now. I could lie. I could retreat to safety. I could make a joke or change the subject or pretend I didn't understand what he was really asking. But I was tired of lying. I see someone who knows exactly who I am, I said. Someone who understands without me needing to explain. I see strength where you see weakness. I see years of survival where you see defeat. I see. I stopped, took a deep breath. I see someone I wanted to know, not just today, not just on this trip, for real. His hands trembled on the steering wheel, imperceptible, but I saw it. Lucas. My name and his voice sounded different, intimate, dangerous. Say it, I whispered. You don't know me. You know nothing about me. We've known each other for... He looked at the dashboard clock. For 3 hours. 3 hours, Lucas. You're imagining things. You're seeing in me what you want to see because I'm the first one who didn't judge, the first who understood. But this isn't real. It can't be. It might not be, I admitted. But it feels real. It feels more real than anything I've ever felt. He shook his head, but I saw the conflict on his face. Desire and fear fighting for control. You're too young to understand, he began. I'm 23, I interrupted. I'm not a child. I know what I feel. And what do you feel? The question was a challenge, a test, a line in the sand. My heart was in my throat, my hands sweating, every fiber of my being screaming to retreat, not to say it, to stay safe. But I had spent my whole life retreating. I feel fear, I said. Fear of disappointing my family, fear of being who I really am, fear of dying alone and full of regret like you said. But I also feel... I stopped, forced the words out. I also feel attraction. To you. To the way you understand me. To the way your gaze makes me feel seen for the first time in my life. The silence that followed was deafening. Diego didn't take his eyes off the road, but I saw his jaw clench. I saw his knuckles turn white on the wheel. I saw the muscle on the side of his neck pulse. You shouldn't have said that, he finally murmured. Why? Because it's true? Because it complicates everything. Maybe it was already complicated from the moment you stopped the truck, I said. You don't stop for anyone. You said so yourself. You never pick up hitchhikers, but you stopped for me. He didn't deny it. Why did you stop, Diego? His breathing was irregular now. I saw his chest rise and fall faster. Because I saw you there, standing on the shoulder with that lost look on your face. And for a second, it was like looking into a mirror of the past. I saw who I was, before everything, and He stopped, his voice cracking a little. I couldn't just drive by. So you felt it too, I said softly. From the beginning. It wasn't just me. Diego finally looked at me, really looked at me, and in his eyes, I saw everything. All the desire he was trying to hide, all the fear, all the loneliness of 20 years crumbling down. I see you, Lucas, he said. His voice was thick with emotion now. The real you, and that's why this is dangerous. Because I recognize it. Because I understand. Because when I look at you, I see everything I wanted to be and never had the courage for. The truck cab felt even smaller now. The space between us, minuscule. I could feel his body heat. I could see every detail of his tired but handsome face, the wrinkles around his eyes, the gray hairs, strength and gentleness fighting for space in the same expression. Do you have the courage now? I asked. My voice was barely a whisper. Diego took a deep breath, his eyes on mine, searching, asking something silent. Courage for what? He asked back, even though we both knew exactly for what. My heart was racing so fast I thought it would explode. My whole life had led me to this moment. Every choice, every lie, every fear. Everything converged there, in that cab, with that man who was truly seeing me for the first time. To stop pretending, I said. To be honest. To act instead of just feeling. What if we regret it? He whispered. What if we don't? He closed his eyes. His breathing was just as uneven as mine. When he opened them again, there was something different there. Decision. Surrender. You don't know what you're getting yourself into, he said. Then show me. Diego opened his mouth, closed it. The words clearly caught in his throat just as much as they had been in mine minutes ago. And then I asked the question, the only one that mattered. Have you ever acted on it? I asked. With someone, with a man. Have you ever... I swallowed hard. Ever let it happen? The question hung in the air between us. Diego looked at me, his dark eyes full of history, of pain, of desire repressed for so long it had become part of who he was. And then he said nothing. His silence was louder than any answer could have been. Because we both knew the question I had really asked wasn't about his past. It was about now. It was about us. And in the way he looked at me, in the way his breathing had changed, in the way the space between us seemed to be shrinking even without either of us moving, I knew the answer. He still hadn't said anything when the road ahead of us curved, disappearing into complete darkness. Just the two of us in that impossible silence. And I realized I had crossed the line. There was no turning back now. Diego didn't answer. He didn't say yes. He didn't say no. He simply gripped the steering wheel tighter, his knuckles turning white in the dim dashboard light, and kept his eyes fixed on the road stretching out before us. But I saw the way his jaw clenched, the way he swallowed hard, the way his breathing became shorter, faster, heavier, and I realized his silence wasn't an absence of an answer. It was the only honest answer he could give. Have you ever acted on it? I had asked. With someone. With a man. Have you ever let it happen? And now the silence between us was so thick I could feel it on my skin, like humidity before rain, like pressure before a storm. Never, Diego finally said, his voice so low I almost didn't hear it over the roar of the engine. I turned to look at him. Never? I repeated. He shook his head slowly, eyes still on the road. Never, not once. 42 years, and I never. He stopped, the sentence dying in the air. I never let it happen. But you wanted to, I said. It wasn't a question. Diego closed his eyes for a second. 2. As if he were trying to decide whether to lie or finally speak the truth out loud. When he opened his eyes again, something had changed in them. My whole life, he said. My whole damn life I've wanted to. The words came out broken, torn, as if each one cost blood to speak. I was 14 when I realized, he continued. I looked at a boy at school the wrong way, felt something I shouldn't feel. And I knew, in that moment, that if anyone found out, if anyone saw what I was feeling, He stopped, his voice failing. "What?" I asked softly. "What would happen?" Diego gave a bitter laugh. "It would be the end. My father would have kicked me out of the house. My friends would have beaten me up. The whole town would have destroyed me. So I learned, Lucas. I learned never to look, never to feel, never to want." "But you still wanted to," I said. He nodded slowly. "I still wanted to. God, I still wanted it so much it hurt. But I never let it happen. Never allowed myself to. Because if I did, if I really let it happen once, I knew I wouldn't be able to go back. I knew I'd never be able to pretend again." "So, you spent your whole life pretending," I said. Diego looked at me for the first time since the conversation had started, and in his eyes, I saw decades. I saw years and years of buried desire, of lies told to everyone, including himself, of lonely nights in this truck, driving empty roads, trying not to think about everything he never allowed himself to have. "I spent my whole life pretending," he confirmed, "and then I found you on the side of that road." My heart raced. "Why did you stop?" I asked. "You said you never pick up hitchhikers, so why did you stop for me?" Diego looked away, but I saw the way his fingers trembled on the steering wheel. "Because I saw you," he said. "Saw you standing there alone, scared, and He swallowed hard. "I saw something in your eyes. Something I recognized." "What?" I whispered. He looked at me again. And this time he didn't look away. "I saw the same thing I used to see in the mirror when I was your age," he said. "Fear, confusion, desire for something you don't know if you can have. And I couldn't leave you there. I couldn't just drive past." "You stopped for me," I said, understanding slowly dawning on me. "It wasn't just kindness. It wasn't just to help. You stopped because you saw something." Diego closed his eyes again. "I stopped because for the first time in 20 years, he said, I felt something that wasn't just loneliness. I saw you, and I felt hope, or desire, or fear. I don't even know. But I felt something, Lucas. And it's been so long since I last let myself feel anything that I didn't even remember what it felt like. Tears burned my eyes, not from sadness, from something deeper, rawer. And now?" I asked. "What are you feeling now?" Diego opened his eyes, looked at me, really looked at me. "Terror," he said, "and desire, and guilt, and hope. All at the same time. Like everything I've repressed my whole life is exploding all at once." "I understand," I said, "because I'm feeling the same thing." The silence returned, but this time it was different. It wasn't empty. It was full, charged, electric. "I can feel you," Diego said suddenly, his voice hoarse. "I can feel the heat of your body from here. I can feel every breath you take. And it's killing me not to." He stopped abruptly. "Not to what?" I asked, my own heart beating so hard I was sure he could hear it. "Not do anything," he said. "Not touch, not let it happen." "Then why don't you let it?" I asked. Diego looked at me, and I saw the struggle happening inside him. I saw decades of repression fighting against a desire so strong it was literally trembling in his hands. "Because if I let it," he said, "there's no turning back. If I touch you, Lucas, if I really let it happen, everything I've spent 42 years building will crumble. All the lies, all the walls, everything." "What if you want it to crumble?" I asked, my voice barely more than a whisper. His breath hitched, and then, without saying a word, Diego began to slow down. The truck slowed gradually. The road ahead of us was completely empty. There were no lights. There were no other vehicles. There was nothing but darkness and asphalt, and the two of us in that cab that was far too small. Diego pulled over onto the shoulder, put the truck in neutral, and turned off the engine. The silence that descended was absolute, deafening. Only his breathing, mine, and the impossible space between us that suddenly seemed to be shrinking without either of us moving. "Why did you stop?" I asked, even though I knew the answer. Diego turned to face me fully for the first time, and in his eyes, I saw everything. All the repressed desire, all the fear, all the desperate hope that maybe, just maybe, he could finally have this. "Because," he said, his voice broken, "if I keep driving, I'll have to drop you off somewhere, and I don't want to leave you." My breath caught in my throat. "Then don't leave me," I said. Diego's hand was on the steering wheel. Mine was in my lap, and the space between them was maybe 20 centimeters, maybe less, but it felt unbridgeable. "I don't know if I can do this," Diego whispered. "I don't know if I'm brave enough." "You drove alone for 20 years, I said. "You survived 42 years pretending to be someone you're not. You are the bravest person I've ever met." He gave a bitter laugh. "Or the most cowardly." "No," I said firmly. "Cowardice would be to keep pretending. Cowardice would be leaving me here without ever knowing what could happen." "And what do you think is going to happen?" he asked, his eyes fixed on mine. "I don't know," I admitted. "But I want to find out." "Even if it's wrong?" he asked. "Even if it's dangerous? Even if you regret it tomorrow?" "I'll regret it more if it doesn't happen," I said. "I'll regret it for the rest of my life." Diego's hand moved, just a centimeter, maybe 2. It left the steering wheel and rested on the seat between us. My heart was beating so hard I was sure he could see it. "I'm afraid," Diego admitted. "I'm so afraid." "Me too," I said. "But I'm more tired of being afraid than I am of feeling." His fingers moved, stopping inches from mine. "Lucas," he said, like a prayer. "Diego." Our hands touched. It wasn't explosive, just fingertips, skin against skin. But the world stopped. Diego let out a sound, half sigh, half sob, as if that small, insignificant touch was at the same time the most terrifying and most necessary thing in his life. I interlaced my fingers with his, slowly, giving him time to pull away, to change his mind, to turn back. But he didn't pull away. He held my hand as if he were holding the only real thing he had touched in decades. "I've waited so long," he whispered, tears finally escaping from the corners of his eyes. "I've waited so long to feel this, to feel anything real." "You don't have to wait anymore," I said. Diego looked at our intertwined hands, at the way his calloused fingers held mine, at the way it felt right in a way he had probably never allowed anything to feel. And then he looked at me, really looked at me, and I knew in that moment that there was no turning back, not for him, not for me, not for both of us. "What happens now?" I asked, my voice barely working. Diego squeezed my hand. "I don't know," he admitted. "But I'm tired of pretending I don't want to find out." The air between us was so charged I could barely breathe. Every second seemed to stretch out. Every beat of my heart seemed louder than the last. Diego's free hand moved, slowly, uncertainly, as if he still didn't believe he was doing this, as if he expected me to stop him at any moment. But I didn't stop him. I let his fingers graze my face. I let his rough palm curve against my cheek. I let his thumb trace the line of my jaw with a gentleness that broke me in two. "Are you real?" Diego asked, his eyes searching mine in the darkness. "Are you real, or have I finally gone mad from being alone so long?" "I'm real," I promised. "And so are you." Tears were streaming freely down his face now. He didn't even try to hide them. "I don't know what I'm doing," he confessed. "I've never done this before. I never allowed myself." "It's okay," I said, placing my free hand over his, which was still holding my face. "We'll figure it out together." Together. He repeated the word as if testing its weight, as if it were a foreign concept, dangerous, impossible. "Together," I confirmed. The silence returned, but this time there was no fear in it. There was anticipation. There was desire. There was the whispered promise of something neither of us had words to name. Diego tilted his head. Just a little. Just enough for me to know what he was asking without him having to say it out loud. And I, with my heart beating so hard it felt like it was going to explode, leaned in too. The space between us closed. 5 centimeters. 4. 3. "Lucas," he whispered my name against my mouth. "This is the last chance to turn back." "I don't want to turn back," I said. 2 centimeters. 1. And then I asked the only thing that mattered. What happens when we stop pretending? Diego's eyes met mine, and in them, I saw the answer neither of us was ready to say out loud. But we didn't need to say it, because we both already knew. There was no turning back now, and neither of us wanted there to be. That was when the impossible happened. I don't know who moved first. Maybe it was me. Maybe it was him. Maybe we moved at the same time, as if the entire universe had conspired for that moment to happen exactly that way. Diego's lips touched mine, and the whole world stopped. It wasn't how I imagined it would be. It wasn't soft. It wasn't gentle. It was desperate. It was hungry. It was as if we had spent 20 years, no, a lifetime holding our breath, and finally could breathe. He pulled me close, his rough hands on my face, my neck, my shoulders. And I clung to him as if he were the only solid thing in a world that had turned to water beneath my feet. He tasted like coffee, like the road, like loneliness transformed into something warm and real and impossible to ignore. I should have been afraid. I should have been thinking about the consequences, my family, the friend who warned me, everything I had been taught about right and wrong. But I wasn't thinking about any of that. I was only feeling the heat of his skin through his shirt, the smell of diesel mixed with sweat, the sound of his breathing, ragged, urgent, like mine, the way his hands trembled when they touched my face, as if he were afraid I would disappear, as if I were a dream he didn't want to wake up from. And maybe I was. Maybe we both were. We pulled apart for a second just to breathe, and his eyes met mine in the darkness of the cabin. And there was so much there. Fear, desire, guilt, relief. 20 years of loneliness begging to be seen, begging to be touched, begging to no longer be alone. "Lucas," he whispered, and my name in his mouth sounded like a prayer, like a confession, like a plea for forgiveness for something he should never have to ask forgiveness for. "Don't stop," I said, "Ma'am, please." And he didn't stop. We kissed again, and this time it was different, slower, deeper, as if we had all the time in the world, even knowing we didn't, even knowing daylight would come and all this would end. But in that moment, none of that mattered. His hands slid down my back, pulling me even closer, and I felt his body against mine. I felt his heart beating wildly, just as fast as mine. I felt every tense muscle, every heavy breath, every second of hesitation giving way to certainty. The certainty that this was real. The certainty that this was right, even if the whole world said it wasn't. I don't know how much time passed. It could have been minutes. It could have been hours. Time had lost all meaning inside that cabin, in that suspended space between who we were before and who we were going to be after. When we finally broke apart again, I was trembling, and I realized he was too. Diego started, but his voice cracked. He ran a hand over his face, his eyes, and when he looked at me again, there were tears there. Tears running down his face, silent, inevitable. And that was when I realized I was crying too. "I'm sorry," he said, his voice husky, broken. "I didn't mean to. I shouldn't have." "No," I cut in, holding his face with both hands, wiping the tears away with my thumbs. "Don't apologize. Not for this." He closed his eyes, taking a deep breath, trembling under my touch. "You don't understand," he whispered. I spent so long." His voice died away again. That's when he turned, reaching for something in the glove box. His fingers trembled as he opened it, digging through old papers and receipts. When he turned back to me, he held a photo. An old, faded photo, its corners worn from being held so often. He handed me the photo slowly, as if he were giving me a piece of his soul. And when I looked, my heart nearly stopped. It was Diego. Younger, much younger. Maybe in his early 20s. His face didn't yet have those lines of exhaustion, that weight of time. His eyes sparkled in a way I had never seen them shine. And beside him, smiling, with his arm draped around Diego's shoulders, was another man. Dark hair, a wide smile, gentle eyes, and the way Diego looked at him in the photo. It was the way he had just looked at me. "Who is it?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. Diego took a deep breath, wiping away tears with the back of his hand. "Rafael," he said, the name sounding like a wound that had never healed. "We grew up together. Same town, same school. We were inseparable." He paused, staring at the photo in my hands as if he could bring that moment back to life. "I fell in love with him when I was 16, Diego continued. "And it took me 5 years to work up the courage to tell him. 5 years of pretending we were just friends. 5 years of dying inside every time he talked about a girl." His voice was cracking again. "And when I finally told him, he said he felt the same. That he always knew. That he was just waiting for me to be brave enough." Diego let out a bitter, humorless laugh. "We had 3 months, he said. 3 months of hiding, of meeting in secret, of pretending to the world that we were just friends." He stopped, taking a deep breath, trying to compose himself. "And then one day, he was coming back from seeing me. It was late, it was raining, and a drunk driver." He didn't need to finish. I looked at the photo again, at Rafael's smile, at his eyes full of life, and felt my chest tighten. 20 years, Diego whispered. "It's been 20 years, and I could never do it again. I could never look at another man. I could never feel this." He looked at me, his eyes red, filled with pain and something that looked like an apology. "Until you." The tears fell faster now. His. Mine. Mingling in the darkness of the cabin, in that sacred space where we had just broken 20 years of silence. "I don't know what I'm doing," Diego confessed, his voice barely more than a whisper. "I just know that when I saw you on that road, alone, with that look in your eyes, I saw him. I saw myself. I saw everything I could never be." He cupped my face again, gently this time, slowly. "And I couldn't just drive past," he said. "I tried, I swear I tried. But I couldn't leave you there. I couldn't let you go on alone." "You didn't leave me," I said, my voice trembling. "You saved me." "No," he said, shaking his head. "You saved me. You have no idea how many times I thought about ending it all. How many times I drove these roads thinking it would be easier to just swerve." My heart tightened in my chest. "But I never had the courage," he continued, "because some part of me, some stupid, stubborn part kept waiting for something, for someone." His eyes found mine. "For you." I couldn't hold it back anymore. I threw myself into his arms, burying my face in his neck, feeling him hold me like I was the most precious thing in the world, and we cried. We cried for everything we never had, for everything we lost, for everything we could never have. We cried for Rafael, for those 3 stolen months, for 20 years of loneliness. We cried for me, for my family, for my friends, for everything I was afraid of losing if I were truly myself. We cried because, for the first time in our lives, we weren't alone, and also because we knew this couldn't last. I don't know how long we stayed like that, holding each other, crying, existing in each other's worlds in a way we never had before. But eventually the tears stopped. Our breathing slowed. And all that was left was just us. Diego pulled back a little, just enough to look into my eyes. He wiped away my tears with his thumb, slowly, with a gentleness I never imagined could exist in those calloused hands. "Thank you," he whispered. "For what?" "For reminding me what it's like to feel." I took his hand, interlacing my fingers with his. "No, thank you," I said. "For showing me that I don't have to be afraid." He smiled. A small smile, tired, but real. "You're lying," he said. "You're scared to death." I let out a wet laugh, wiping my own face. "I am," I admitted. "But for the first time, it's okay to be scared." "Yeah," he agreed. "It is okay." We sat in silence for a while, just holding hands, listening to the sound of the empty road outside, the wind beating against the truck's metal frame. And that's when I realized. The sky was starting to lighten. Very slowly, almost imperceptibly, but it was happening. A thin strip of blue on the horizon, pushing the darkness away. Diego followed my gaze and saw it too. "Sun's coming up," he said. And there was something in his voice, something that sounded like a goodbye. "I know," I said. We stared at the horizon through the windshield, watching the light grow. Slowly, inevitably. And I knew that when the sun fully rose, this night would end. This night that changed everything. This night we would never forget. But not yet. Not yet. We still had a few minutes before reality returned. Before the decisions, before the goodbyes. A few minutes just to be us. Diego squeezed my hand. I squeezed back. And we watched the sky lighten together. Two men who had spent their whole lives hiding who they were. Two men who, for one night, could finally stop pretending. Two men who knew the outside world wouldn't understand. But who, at least for a few more minutes, didn't care. Because in that truck, in that cab, in that tiny space between night and day, we were free. And that was all that mattered. The light kept growing, and we stayed there, holding each other. Until we couldn't anymore. Because there's always a moment when the night ends. But life isn't a movie. There's always a moment when reality comes back to collect. And that morning arrived slowly. But it arrived. The sky started to truly brighten. It wasn't that shy pink on the horizon anymore. It was light. It was day. It was the world coming back. Diego was the first to move. He didn't say anything. He just let go of my body carefully, like someone who doesn't want to hurt you. Then he sat on the edge of the mattress, his back to me, and just stayed there. Still. Staring ahead. I stayed lying down, just watching his back. His broad shoulders, his sun-weathered skin. The scars I had touched during the night, and I knew we weren't going to talk about this. Not yet. Because there was a silence between us now. It wasn't bad. It wasn't awkward. It was just heavy. As if we knew that any word would break something. Diego took a deep breath. Then he got up. He picked his shirt up off the floor, put it on without looking at me. Grabbed his pants. Put them on too. I stayed there, just watching. He went to the cab, opened the door. The morning light flooded in, invading everything. And with it came the noise of the road, of trucks passing, of horns, of life. Diego looked back, looked at me, and for the first time since the night had ended, he spoke. "We need to go." It wasn't cold, it wasn't distant, it was just real. And I understood. I got up, got dressed, fixed my hair as best I could, tried to look normal. Tried to look as if nothing had changed. But everything had changed. Diego went back to the driver's seat. I sat next to him, in the same spot as yesterday. But now it was different. Everything was different. He started the engine. The roar of the truck filled the silence between us. And we got back on the road. Neither of us said anything for the first few minutes. I looked out the window, watched the landscape passing by. The trees, the houses, the sun fully rising, illuminating everything. And I thought, I should be happy. I had lived the most intense night of my life. I had felt things I had never felt before. I had been touched by someone who really saw me. But I wasn't happy. I was sad. Because I knew this was going to end. Because I knew that when we reached my town, when I got out of that truck, everything would go back to how it was before. Diego would go on with his life, I would go on with mine. And that night would become just a memory. It was Diego who broke the silence. "You're quiet." I looked at him. He kept his eyes on the road, but I could see the tension in his jaw, the way he gripped the steering wheel. "Just thinking," I said. "About what?" I took a deep breath. "About how weird it is. We spent the whole night talking. And now it feels like we have nothing left to say." Diego fell silent for a while. Then he let out a short laugh, humorless. "That's because we said everything yesterday." And it was true. We had said everything. Everything that mattered. Everything we had never told anyone. And now there was nothing left. Only the weight of what we had done. Only the certainty that this couldn't go on. "How much longer?" I asked. "About 20 minutes. 20 minutes. 20 minutes, and it would all be over." I looked at him again. At this man I had met yesterday, whom I had touched during the night, who had touched me back. And I wanted to say something. I wanted to say, what if we didn't stop? What if we just kept driving? What if we forgot everything and just stayed together? But I didn't say it. Because I knew the answer. We couldn't. Diego's life was on the road. Mine was in college. He was 42. I was 23. He lived in a truck. I lived with my parents. It made no sense. It made no sense at all. But still, it hurt. The minutes passed slowly. The landscape changed. The trees became sparser, the houses more frequent. And suddenly I recognized it. It was the entrance to my town. The gas station on the corner. The faded sign with the name. The traffic light that never worked right. Diego slowed down. "Is this it?" he asked. "Yeah." He pulled the truck over to the side of the road, right there, at the entrance to town, where anyone could see. But he didn't care. And neither did I. He turned off the engine. And there was that silence again. That heavy silence. Full of things we weren't going to say. I looked ahead. At my town. At my parents' house, which was about 15 minutes away. And I thought, I'm going to get out of this truck and everything will go back to normal. But nothing was going to go back to normal. The old Lucas had been left behind on that road. Because I wasn't the same anymore. Diego reached into his pocket, pulled out his phone, unlocked it, handed it to me. "Put your number in." I looked at him, surprised. "Seriously?" He didn't smile. He just kept holding the phone out. "Put it in." I took it, typed my number, saved it as Lucas, handed it back. Diego looked at the screen, then at me. "I don't know if I'll call," he said, "but I want to have the option." I understood. He wasn't promising anything. He wasn't saying we were going to see each other again. He was just saying, perhaps. And perhaps was all we had. "I understand," I said. Diego put the phone away. He stared straight ahead, at his hands on the steering wheel. "Are you going to be okay?" he asked. And that broke me a little. Because he was asking for real. He was asking if I could go back to my life. If I could pretend nothing had happened. If I could hide this from everyone. "I don't know," I answered. Honestly. "But I think so." He nodded, slowly. "I don't know either." And we just sat there, just existing in the same space, for the last time, until I knew. I knew if I didn't get out now, I never would. So I took a deep breath, opened the door, stepped down. The ground felt strange beneath my feet, like I'd forgotten what it was like to walk on earth. I closed the door, looked up. At Diego, still sitting inside, he rolled down the window. We looked at each other. And I wanted to say so much. I wanted to say, thank you. I wanted to say, I'll never forget this. I wanted to say, you saved me. But all that came out was, drive safe. Diego smiled, just a little, sadly. Always do. And that was it. He started the engine, put the truck in gear, and began to pull away. I stood there, frozen. Watching him leave, the truck disappeared down the road. I stood there, alone, with the sun coming up. I walked home. My mom was in the kitchen. "You're home early," she said. "Got a ride from a trucker." Well, that was nice of him. Yeah. I went up to my room. I didn't wait for a text from Diego. I knew he wouldn't call. What we lived didn't need a sequel. It was two men who found each other and for one night stopped pretending. I lay in bed. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't afraid to sleep. I wasn't the kid who climbed into that truck anymore. I knew who I was, and that was enough. If you've ever had a moment that changed everything, that made you realize who you really are, know that it's worth it.